Hey, how's it going? Welcome to Tell You What, the podcast, where we talk with musicians about songwriting and the creative process. Our guests this time are Vivian Leva and Riley Calcagno. We discuss their excellent self-titled record that was released last year, 2021. I was able to interview Vivian and Riley in person last fall at the AmericanaFest in Nashville. It was my first in-person interview in quite some time. It was a real treat to be able to do that, and I appreciate them for making the time in their busy AmericanaFest schedule to sit down with me. As you will hear in the discussion, they had two different bands they are a part of that were both showcasing artists at the fest. Okay, a bit of business first, and for this I am joined once again by Susan, the spiritual advisor to the podcast. Hello, Susan.
Hello.
I know everyone, including you, Susan, have been anxiously awaiting the results of our first ever listener contest. Strangers have been stopping me on the street demanding to know who won, right?
Right.
Thank you to all of you who entered. It took us a while to process all the entries. They've been stacked up in piles all over the Tell You What studios here. So let's cut to the chase. Our winner, whose guess was the closest to the actual answer, was Peter H. I will protect Peter's full identity from the press for the time being, but Peter is a friend of the podcast. He also happens to be a talented musician and part of the open mic at Grandpa's.
That Peter. Okay.
Yes, that Peter. We know a lot of Peters. He's also part of the open mic at Grandpa's Place in Glenview, Illinois, if any of you would like to hear his talents on display on a Tuesday night. Peter will be receiving his Tell You What merch bundle shortly. And to all of you who missed out this time, be on the lookout for our next competition. More valuable prizes coming your way. Right?
Woohoo!
So I really enjoyed this discussion with Vivian and Riley. We've had guests before that grew up, as these two did, playing and participating in the traditional old-time and or bluegrass worlds as children. The members of Lula Wiles, for example. More recently, we had Rachel Bayman on. Now, these artists are now making music that contains the roots of the traditional styles, but in a more contemporary Americana style. Vivian and Riley, interestingly, have on the one hand kept playing the old-time traditional music and songs continuously since their youth in the band The Onlies, of which they are both members. On the other hand, they, as a duo, have now created this amazing album of original songs, which are certainly rooted in the musical traditions they grew up in, but at the same time offer fresh and unique arrangements, lyrical styles, and themes drawn from the current moment. This dual ongoing musical expression that they are part of gave us a lot of interesting things to discuss. So check out this great record titled Vivian Leva and Riley Calcagno. I really love it, and I think many of you will also. One more piece of business. Some of you may notice a slight upgrade in the sound quality of this podcast episode. Maybe you won't because you thought it sounded great before. That's fine. But we have been working to fine-tune the sound things around here. And I would like to thank Pittsburgh's favorite Foley artist, Kevin Lynch, who has been graciously providing me with insights in this ongoing learning process. Thank you, Kevin.
Yes.
Also, quick shout out to Devin Ledger at Hearth Music for helping make this conversation happen. That is much appreciated as well. So, let's get to it. Here is our Tell You What discussion with Vivian Leva and Riley Calcagno. Welcome to Tell You What, the podcast. Thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
We are here in Nashville at our Tell You What satellite studios. It's pretty nice, don't you think?
It's great.
I can't believe you, just incredible remote location you got.
Yeah, we took some of the generous podcast revenues, all the profits we've been making, plowed them back in and built the studio. So I'm glad you appreciate it. We are here at AmericanaFest, and I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to have you here doing this on-location interview. Your record, self-titled record, came out about 6 months ago. Do I have that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It has gotten some attention, well-deserved. I think it is really great, so congratulations for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I often find it interesting to talk to artists after their records have been out for a bit. Now that you've had some time to reflect on the songs after they've been out in the world and kind of living out there. So do you find your relationship to the songs has changed since they've been out in the world?
Well, I'm not sure if it's... I still feel close to the songs, especially because when we released the record, we hadn't actually been playing them very much because
Right.
we recorded all the music in January, the beginning of January of 2020. And so that was
Right
kind of a while
before,
ago.
yeah.
And that was a couple months before everything shut down. And then we were in lockdown and weren't playing shows really. And only since this summer have we been able to actually perform them live and kind of revisit them.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, even though the songs are old in some ways, they're kind of being renewed right
Yeah.
now for us, I think, or at least for me. Yeah.
I feel like I'm sort of playing covers.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
just 'cause
so
it's
that's a different take on this.
which is actually kind of nice when you're so removed from writing the songs, like 3 years plus sometimes, like removed from writing the songs. It feels a little bit like we're playing someone else's songs. It's a prior version of ourselves. So it's fun to get up and just present something that doesn't feel so immediate.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, normally at this time, I would take us back in time and I might ask about early musical memories, what from your youth has made its way into what you are creating now. I think I need to take a different approach here as you two have been doing what you are doing one way or another since you were very young, right? You've been immersed in this kind of music. So let's talk a bit about that. Vivian, you grew up with parents, very highly regarded musicians in the traditional string band, old-time music world, right?
I did.
In Virginia.
Yes.
So would you say you were immersed in a musical world as a kid? Is that the world you lived in?
Yeah, absolutely. My parents are both in the traditional old-time music scene. My dad learned fiddle from Tommy Jarrell, and my mom was learning from ballad singers, and they were in a bunch of string bands. And they got really into that music, and growing up, they would bring me to old-time music festivals and things like that. And at the same time, they were kind of branching out into extending that genre of old-time music, and they are also songwriters, and so
Right.
they were in a great duo together, Jones and Leva, and when I was very little, they were touring and bringing me along with them. So, and then when I was about 9, I started playing with my dad in his bands.
Wow.
And so throughout
Fiddle.
I was playing guitar and singing.
Okay.
And he wrote songs and sang traditional songs and played fiddle and guitar and things. Yeah, so that was something I did throughout when I was a teenager, more seriously when I was maybe 15 through when I graduated high school. I was performing with him. But yeah, that combination of just kind of growing up in the old time world and, that stretched across the country and going to different festivals, and then also them doing it professionally and kind of being a part of that is, my background in Virginia.
And Riley, you found your way pretty early to a similar musical scene, right? When you were pretty young.
Yeah, so I grew up in Seattle, and kind of like Viv, I grew up going to fiddlers conventions on the West Coast, not the East Coast. So kind of removed of where that music came from, but in the 60s and the 70s, the 80s, it made its way across the country in the folk revival. And my dad kind of jumped from experimental weird sound music to old time fiddle music.
Interesting jump.
In the 90s, and I asked for a fiddle when I was 2 years old and just got kind of sucked into this fiddle scene. It was actually a weird coincidence
Wait, you asked for a fiddle when you were
When I was 2, yeah, I was just like, I want to do that.
I don't think I could say the word fiddle when I was 2.
They gave me like a tiny one, and I just scratched away at it. Little ukulele. I mean, I think a lot of kids are sort of transfixed by something. Yeah. I also liked firefighters and stuff like that, but fiddle was one of the things I was into, and yeah, I grew up in that fiddle scene.
Yeah, I understand you formed your first band at the age of
7.
Yeah. And if I have this right, the lineage of that band continues, right?
Yeah.
That was the Onlies?
It was the Onlies.
It was the Onlies.
Well, it is the Onlies.
It is the Onlies. Yes, present tense. The Onlies are playing here at AmericanaFest.
Yes.
Vivian, you are now a member of the Onlies.
I am. Yeah, I've been added.
This may be some kind of AmericanaFest record of some sort, I think. Your kindergarten band has continued on, and now I'm going to have to check the archives, AmericanaFest archives, to see if something like that has ever happened. It's fascinating.
We'll have to go deep in the stacks.
Yeah. Don't you think that's amazing?
Yeah, it is wild. It's this band that I met these friends, Sammy and Leo from the Onlies. I met Sammy at swim class. We were 1.5. I met Leo at the indoor playground. We were 2, and our dads bonded over playing fiddle and banjo music. And we got into playing the band when we were 7.
This is an amazing story. So when did you two first connect musically?
Well, there's so many little overlapping things. So we didn't actually meet until 2016. We were both had just graduated high school, and this was the summer after that. But at least Riley definitely knew about me and my family because he grew up listening to my parents' music and all their different bands. He had all their recordings, and Sammy and Leo also did as well. And actually, one thing that we learned after I was added to the band is that Leo and I met also when we were 2 years old, when my parents were on tour on the West Coast, and they dropped me off at someone's house for a play date. They knew they had a kid my age, and they needed a babysitter while they went and played a show, and it turned out it was Leo.
Hopefully. You found this out years later.
Yes. Yeah.
Did you write any songs during that time?
We should have.
Leo's post his songwriting phase now.
Yeah, but there was definitely overlaps in, who we knew and the music that we were making on opposite sides. And it wasn't until my mom and I were in Washington teaching at a vocal camp called VoiceWorks. And Riley and the Onlies were coming for the following week, called Fiddle Tunes, and they happened to come a few days early, and we overlapped by 2 nights maybe.
Right.
And I think we were really excited about the fact that we were all of the exact same age in the same phase of life, which is not always common in this world. Usually there's like some age differences. Right. Which is great, but it was just exciting to meet people my own age. Yeah. And we just played music all night, and I kind of joined the Onlies as a guest for a while on tour, and Riley and I started also doing experimenting with being a duo and writing songs together. So those kind of happened around the same time, I would say. Yeah.
So were you can each answer this question, writing original music from the earliest days of your musical lives?
I think I was making up songs when I was 5 or 6, and they kind of grew once I learned how to play the guitar when I was 10. So
you would just sing melodies, that kind of thing?
With words, yeah. Yes. I'd make up melodies and words, maybe tinker on the piano. But I think my songwriting probably took off when I was 13, I'd say, but I was always making stuff up.
Yeah.
One thing that fascinates me, Viv, about your early songwriting is that it was so incredibly dark. There's still is. There's a bootleg tape of her songs. How old were you at that CD that Al Tharp recorded? 12?
Probably.
And there's a song that describes a plane crash in slow motion, in all the horror. It's I don't know.
No gore.
No gore.
Just
but
emotional.
The emotional side of the plane crash.
Yes.
Which maybe is
I don't think that I would have wanted to hear the songs my children would have written when they were 12 or 13. They were probably fairly dark and probably didn't have a nice thing to say about me at that time.
Well, what do you expect? The first song that my dad taught me was the murder ballad called "Oh the Wind and Rain." So
there you go.
That was in there.
Yeah.
How about you, Riley? When was original music become part of what you were doing?
I think growing up, I was pretty strictly into fiddle music and playing instrumental kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But when I got to start feeling things as a tween, I started to try to put some of those things to lyrics, mostly ill-fated attempts that are unfortunately documented for the public record. And I've tried to scour the internet and remove clips, but there's some early examples of songwriting.
So you're 13, 14 years old.
Yeah, mostly abstract and depressing.
Were you accompanying yourself on the fiddle for these early attempts?
I was playing by that time guitar banjo,
yeah.
And we were arranging some of those songs in the Onlies.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about the old-time music tradition. We had Rachel Bayman on the podcast. You actually said you listened to part of that. Thank you.
Yeah. Y'all go check it out.
Yeah. I enjoy talking to her about her time when she was younger in this tradition. I find it interesting to hear about traditional music forms in terms of creative process. So this style, old-time style, involves learning songs that are passed down through the years, generally speaking, right? Mm-hmm. So can you talk about how you view creativity within this tradition, both in terms of playing this canon of existing songs and how new songs find their way into this tradition?
I think that a lot of the ways that we bring new songs into the tradition and in the really traditional material we play is actually by kind of going backwards. So, scouring archives and finding little clips of things that we haven't heard before. We were just talking about how it is really hard to find original sounding old songs. Mm. And then Viv's parents have, and Viv, you've written some songs that sort of toe that line that really sound like string band music, but are original. So I think it's a kind of about contributing to the existing sonic landscape of traditional old time music. What do you think?
Well, when you're learning traditional thing, even though it's kind of a set, existing things that you wouldn't necessarily think of as being like creative,
right?
It is a creative process to go back and listen to all these things, find what's interesting, and then kind of rework it so that you can play it.
Yes.
Because a lot of it is irregular or difficult to hear. Or maybe there's not all the verses are recorded, or all these things that are cool to listen to, but aren't necessarily easy to play. So, for instance, with the Onlies, it's a fun process when we're trying to find new material of just going and listening, seeing what kernel is interesting to us, and then trying to rework it together in a way that feels true to how we play music, and but still keeping the essence of the tune or song. And I think it's similar for songwriting. I don't ever sit down and think, I want to write a song that sounds old or that sounds like this other thing that already exists. But those songs are definitely in my mind and my heart. And so I think I also, when I'm writing songs, there might be something that's classic or referencing an older tradition, but that the words, for instance, are truer to my present feelings, not just kind of, I might make a nod at a well-worn lyric or something, but to carry it on into something that's genuine to your the moment.
Yes.
This is kind of making me think of our bandmate Sammy Brayman was digging around in some archives, some recordings that someone had sent her from the Berea College archives, and found this recording of this woman, Queen Belle Randolph, singing this song called "Dear Little Soldier Boy." And it was a song that she had written she was from North Carolina, Yancey County, I think, and it was this song that she had written about her son leaving for the Vietnam War, and she also played fiddle and fiddle tunes. And anyway, we put it together. Sammy had this great sort of like vision for how to dig in an archive and find something that would fit the band. So she brought this song to us, and we worked it up in a way that was definitely our own, but sort of faithful to the recording, and put it out on our latest Onlies CD. And just this week, there's a video of us playing it online, and her son, a different son from the one who unfortunately died in the war, commented and said, "I remember my mom singing this as a kid." And that kind of I was thinking about that this morning. It kind of blew my mind how wild that would be to hear the song from your childhood and on YouTube from this random band from Seattle. Just this song that your mom sang around the house that was somehow documented by an archivist.
That's a great story, and it kind of brings to life that thread of traditional music, right? About how these things survive and make their way from generation to generation.
Yeah. And sometimes they really make their way in a way that is hard for us to understand and is sort of bizarre and almost surreal. Yeah.
So a lot of the songs you play in that tradition are classics. They've been around, let's say, forever, for a long time, right? You don't even know where some of them came from. Do you allow yourselves to think about some of the songs you are writing maybe will have that kind of life?
I don't
Never
know.
thought about
I've never
that.
thought about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like when you're looking back at old songs, like a lot of those songs there's like hundreds of songs that have a similar melody.
Right.
Or like with just slight variations on lyrics. So that's like part of the tradition. So I sometimes wonder if songs just need to like compound on each other to gain sort of that traditional status. So, maybe it's possible that some phrase that we write or some little melody will find itself into another song that'll morph into another song.
Someone will find it in the metaverse.
Yes.
I think that's where they'll find it. You all are very busy musicians. You have 2 different bands performing here at AmericanaFest. You have your duo act and the Onlies, which we've talked about. How do you look at the music you are creating and playing in these different ventures? Do you feel like you're putting on different hats, creative hats for the different bands? String band over here, songwriting, and I use air quotes here, indie style of duo music over here, and you shift back and forth, or is it more of just a melting pot in your brain?
I think for me, they are totally different switches. We were at a fiddlers convention a couple weekends ago, and we were playing both an only set and a duo set, and the festival was just sitting around in the field playing fiddle tunes. And when it came time to rehearse for our duo set, it was like, whoa, what are we doing here? This is bizarre to be playing these emotional songs to all these fiddle picking, not banjo picking heads.
Yeah.
It feels like the original songs feel like this sort of more like solitary or like
vulnerable too.
Yeah.
Because we very rarely play the same events as both the duo and the string band. So normally they're totally separate, but it was really interesting doing these like 2 totally different sets back to back. And it's different hats, different feelings, creative processes. Like the Onlies is fun. It's like a really fun, energetic band. Even though, some of the traditional songs might be about death or like, work accidents or
all of the traditional songs.
All of them. Mine, working on a railroad.
Yes.
It's not that the subject matters are that happy, but there's a certain joy in playing them. And also there's 4 of us, so there's just a lot of energy and we get to play off of each other. And
so do you find that brings a balance to what you're doing? Like if you're only doing one or the other, do you think that in effect one ends up helping the other by giving you this balance?
I definitely love having both projects going. These are both two parts of 2 kinds of music that I really value, and I love playing old time music. I also wouldn't want to only play old time music. I love writing songs and being real about what I am going through and feeling, and getting to incorporate all of the musical styles that I listen to and enjoy, and, not having to keep it in a box, but, play with country music and indie music and pop and, all that stuff. So they're both very important to me and also different, but, not that different. They come from the same place, but...
Well, speaking of the different styles of music, Riley, if I have this correct, you studied classical music at some point, right?
I did, yeah.
How do you see any of that classical music influence in what you're doing with these projects?
I grew up kind of between going to fiddlers conventions and playing gigs with the Onlies. I was like shedding on this old classical music as a kid, and I kind of stumbled into conservatory without...
Was there a particular instrument that you were studying?
Yeah, on the violin.
Violin, okay.
Yeah. I didn't last too long doing that because I was leaving so much to play gigs.
Right.
And when I was supposed to be practicing my etudes, I was like playing Willie Nelson songs on the piano. And it just wasn't something that felt like, I think music needs to feel like you need to do it. But there is something about classical music that there's a precision, like a attention to detail that I think that other musics can borrow from. I think music sounds better when it's thoughtfully put together and has, discipline. And in classical music, you're thinking about how the music conveys emotion or conveys like a certain feeling or vibe. And you're doing that. It's like a painting. Like it's abstract, but you're giving it life or you're giving it feeling. And I think that I try to do that sometimes in our duo, like with my guitar parts or banjo parts or fiddle parts, trying to like paint around the meaning of the song.
Yeah.
So I don't like think about classical music that much these days, even though I love it. I think it's beautiful stuff, but I think it has taught me like
it's in there.
Little kernels of how to dance around.
I had the Brother Brothers on the show. They started out as classical music students and then found their way to bluegrass. And they talked about how refreshing the collaborative community aspect of string music was after kind of the competitive world of classical music training.
I would say that classical music, in my mind, is in a bit of a crisis because it's music that's deeply beautiful, so well put together and has so much power behind it, but it's not being in the common conservatory. I think it's not being reimagined. But I think that's starting to change, and I think people actually are taking inspiration from the fiddle world and from the string, creative string community, and giving new spins to how they think about that old music and how they might write new music. So I think there's a lot of hope in the classical world, but for me, it wasn't something that felt like I needed to be playing it. So there's a lot of people who do feel like that. It's like if they're not playing classical music, they're not breathing.
Right. One more question about this topic. Can we maybe draw a parallel between classical music and the old time tradition in the terms of how they both draw from this canon of songs and are learning the same songs through time?
I think about that a lot because I do think that in this weird way, and not a weird way actually, classical music is traditional music. You're learning, even though it's written down, you are learning a sort of canon of songs that's, whether you realize it or not, been interpreted or been put together in a specific way, and you're learning a version of it through like the string pedagogy or whatever.
Right.
And I think that actually classical music doesn't realize it, but it could learn, and I think it is starting to learn from the folk world, from the old time world, and just people right, and people getting together and playing for joy. I think that's something that doesn't happen as much as it should. In the
that's kind of the vibe
scene.
I got from talking to the brothers about the joy they found when they went into the bluegrass world that was kind of missing from what they did.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, let's talk about collaboration in your creative process, maybe in the context of how this wonderful album came together. I understand you were in different parts of the country as most of these songs came to life, right? Mm-hmm. So can you maybe compare and contrast the times that you have worked that way, where you're sending bits of ideas back and forth, an asynchronous process, right? You can kind of respond when you get around to it, versus the times when you work together in the same room. How did you each approach? Did you find your creative process individually was different when you were in the room versus separated?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because you would think that being far apart would make it difficult to collaborate together and create new music. But for me, at least, it was probably the best situation for us, actually, when we were writing. I personally don't like writing in the same room at the same time. I need to have space and be alone to do it. And so this was actually kind of a difficult but a good setup where we were visiting each other fairly often. And so we could present or like share things that we were working on and get enough excitement and inspiration from each other to either finish a song or go home and work on it more on our own and then bring it to each other the next time we saw each other over voice memo or whatever. But just having that degree of separation, was inspiring just subject-wise for a lot of the songs, content, and also it just gave at least me space to work on my own, but like enough accountability to still create.
Did you find a difference, Riley, in the different methods?
I felt a lot of those same things. We would really like pass little kernels back and forth. I'm a good song starter, but a horrible song finisher. So Viv always helps me, figure out where to go with something. And oftentimes Viv turns out these beautiful, pretty much full-formed songs in one sitting. That's happened a couple times on this record. And one example, I think, is Hollowed Hearts, which is a song on this record.
We're going to get to that one.
It's my favorite song on the record, and it kind of came out in one sitting except for one line.
You got one line.
So I got one line in there. So sometimes there'll just be tiny little holes that I'll help in put the last.
Well, you went there. Let's talk about this song.
Yeah.
There's often a song on a record that I just keep coming back to. It grows on me, and often I don't really know why I keep coming back to that song. There's something special about this song. I can't quite put my finger on it, but I keep coming back. And what do you think? What do you think about this song? And do you understand kind of what I'm saying about there's something there that is musically special about this song?
What do you think?
Well, I mean, I didn't write it, so I agree with you. And to me, it's like this song that just holds so much feeling. I think not just in the lyrics, but also just like the tension of the melody and the chords. And it's just like every time we play it on stage, it's like feels like the most intense, but also the most like cathartic song. So I think this.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's just a lot of kind of tension and release, just chordally and melodically.
There's a seeming simplicity here that is deceptive, I think, in this song.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was one of the songs that just totally came out, and it was totally just from intense feeling, which I think is just a big part of it, is that it was raw. And I think it kind of follows the roller coaster of emotions of like being kind of like the verses are like kind of calm and low, and then it like the chorus kind of escalates, and this like, and then we sing really high in that part, and then actually my dad has a hand in this when we were showing him this song and the bridge where Riley playing a lead part, and my dad suggested that we like repeat. What did he exactly suggest?
Well, James is an expert at he loves that tension. Yeah. So that part in the guitar bridge that goes da, 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 and it just repeats that phrase like
while
longer.
the chords are changing underneath
There's
it.
the
but
beautiful
that's
extended instrumental part in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's like keeping some things stagnant while the melody is moving over top of it. That kind of creates this yearning.
Take what you want, I'll give you anything. Just give me one night inside of your dreams. Please let me hold you and see you're still here and hear what I've told you. Turn around, curse my name, tell me I am to blame. Pace the floor, ask me why things happen this way. Take my hand, pull me in, say you'll love me again.
As these songs are being formed, how do you think they end up in the musical style they do? So, for example, how does the song tell you that it is a waltz? Or does that does the song maybe try different forms?
It just, that's funny because I've noticed recently, I'm like, I write a lot of waltzes. Or like, I want to write a lot of waltzes, and sometimes I have to be like, no, try to do this in 4/4 or whatever.
So will you
I
sometimes
don't
try
think
the
of
same idea in a 4/4 versus a waltz and see what happens?
Maybe at the very beginning,
Yeah.
if I really don't have a clear idea what the song's going to be yet. But like Hollowed Hearts, for instance, that just happened. I never considered doing it as anything else.
For me, like song ideas just kind of appear, and then if I don't write them down or record them, they just disappear. So they kind of just like flit in, and sometimes they'll just flit in as a certain thing.
Yeah.
But I also think it's like sort of what you listen to and the sounds you hear in your head as like inspires what kind of
Maybe what you've listened to recently.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the record as a whole. You recorded this in Louisiana, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
How do you think that sense of place with its rich musical tradition made its way onto these tracks, if you think it did?
I think it did. I'd never been to Louisiana before, but at the place that we first met out in Port Townsend, there's good friends of mine who show up every year from Louisiana and bring really rich Cajun tradition to that place. So it's a music that sort of feels like home, but it feels like home over in Port Townsend.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlaps with Cajun music. I also grew up going to, when I was 16, I went to this camp called Augusta in West Virginia.
Yeah.
And I went during the country week, which classic country music, but it was also paired with Cajun week. Mm-hmm. So there's like a lot of overlap anyways with Cajun and old time and country.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of that maybe was already in your music before you.
Yeah, I mean, probably not that deep or anything, but it's it's familiar, and importantly, we just have connections with people who live down there. And
I mean, musicians on the record were from that.
Yeah, so I feel like that was kind of the main thing. So the guy who produced and engineered the record, his name is Joel Savoy, and he's a great Cajun fiddler, and he kind of helped put together this great band of people that he's worked with before, who many of them were from Louisiana, some from Nashville actually, but yeah, I think his kind of how he created the band certainly was part of it.
Yeah. And just the sensibility of like being in a room and putting together songs. I think that we related from our experience in traditional music or old time music. I think that there's overlap in just how Cajun musicians, old time musicians traditional musicians in general approach music and approach putting together music together. So.
Yeah.
Doing a lot of aspects live when possible
okay.
to get, a good energy. And yeah.
So you were playing all together at some points for some of these songs.
Yeah, there's at least a couple songs that were totally live.
Most of them.
And most of them were like
Most.
90% live, but maybe we revisited
Yep. That's great.
certain aspects of it. But yeah, that's definitely part of it.
Let's talk about another song, Leaving on Our Minds.
Yeah.
Lyrically, this lays out a recurring theme on some of these songs, distance and distance in relationships, right? But it puts it in a great kind of honky-tonk framework. Great pedal steel here. Lyrically, it also kind of nods to that honky-tonk hangdog kind of style, right? So this is what you're talking about before, about taking your take on some of these older styles, right? So what can you tell us about this song?
This song was one that I started after we had just had a visit together in Portland. We were staying at this Airbnb and Riley had to leave.
Like this fantastic recording studio we're in.
Yes.
Yeah. Riley had to leave at like 4 a.m. or something to go back home. And then I woke up in this like really echoey Airbnb by myself, and it was just really lonely. And so then I just kind of started walking around and started writing this first verse of this song. And yeah, that was my first year at a new college as well. I transferred there, and it was just a time of transition and isolation and figuring out a new place. I remember I wrote the second verse in the dorm shower there. But Riley helped write the chorus, and which I think is a very important.
Would you say I helped write the chorus?
Riley wrote most of the chorus.
No, I'm just teasing. I'm totally teasing you.
But yeah, that was definitely, and I think the chorus is definitely a nod to.
Yeah.
I mean, lyrically, it is a nod. We referenced Silver Wings.
Yeah, I was listening to, I think we both were, like, ton of classic country. I was just set up my, like, record player and was just spinning all this Willie and Merle and just kind of getting into that scene. And I wrote this in, like, one of those practice rooms, or started to write the chorus. I helped write the chorus in one of these practice rooms.
I had nothing to do with the chorus.
Playing on the piano, even though I don't play the piano well at all. It just felt like kind of one of those honky-tonk piano vibes.
There's nothing that I hate more than a Sunday. It's the day that decides all good things must end. It's looming there, a sorry reminder that goodbye's lying just around the bend. Well, if we'll stand the test of time, then we'll have to walk that line of loving with leaving on our minds. You're headed off on silver wings, not knowing what these years may bring, just knowing so long as you're mine, I don't mind.
By the way, I'd like to point out, Vivian, your last record's theme was time,
Yes.
right? Here we have distance and space, right?
What's
This
next?
record. If we keep going with this, if you keep going with this, I think we might end up solving the mysteries of quantum physics,
Yes.
right?
I hope so.
I'm going to suggest gravity for the next one.
Oh,
and we can
yes.
kind of...
There you go.
Yeah, these big, totally unintentional, but I guess that's just how I was going.
I know, it's really bizarre, actually.
Let's talk about the song Love and Chains.
Yeah.
Here's the one I think most pushes you out of the traditional string band themes and into the indie world a bit. I think it's just a lovely song in sound as well as sentiment. Riley, you take lead vocals here, right, on this song. And you kind of trade off a little bit. Can you talk about how this one came together, maybe in the context of venturing further from the traditional forms that you were in?
Oftentimes when I venture from traditional forms. I stumble into it. So I made plans with a friend in the town I was living in, and it was a small town, so I wandered over to his house and walked up to his room, and he wasn't there, and he actually never showed up. But I just sat in his room for like 3 hours, and his telly was on, and the amp was on, so I just grabbed his telly, and there was this sunset out the window, so I just sat there and played electric guitar, which is not something that I had done much to that point. So I kind of just stumbled, and every time I do that, I kind of discover something new because I'm not used to it. So I just was sitting there waiting for him, and this little song came to me, and it, as is typical for me, I wrote one verse and put it down, and then we worked on it for like I think a full year.
Wow!
So it just came in little bits and pieces, and I would bug Viv, like, Viv, can you please help me finish that song? And she would never do it until she did.
Yeah.
And actually, that friend who flaked out that night, he also his name is Sam Bailey. He's a wonderful person and a great songwriter. He was one of the writers on Time Is Everything from Viv's first album.
Mm-hmm.
He also helped kind of give some direction to that song. So
we owe him 2 debts: one for being late, and
No
secondly,
show.
actually helped with the song.
Yeah, that was a funny co-writing process.
Yeah.
It took a long time, and also it was, I think, I've been trying to remember how we got to the place of trading off, of us basically both singing lead, like switching. I come in with harmony, and then I take the lead for the chorus, and then Riley takes the lead. And I think that was kind of just a fluke, or like when I started working on it, I started coming up with the chorus or whatever that part was, because I would we wouldn't change the key for whether you were singing it or whether I was singing it. So I just started doing something that worked in my range that Riley couldn't sing in his range, and so we started doing it like that, where he sang one part and I sang one part, and it felt not cohesive. And then I was like, well, maybe what if I come in halfway through on your part, and then it just kind of evolved from trying to co-write that together, and it being just in different places in our ranges.
The way the vocals come together on this song is really remarkable. I think it's one of the hooks of the song, of which there are several, but whatever you ended up doing works.
Oh, cool.
Cracked white ceiling, staring disbelieving while you lie asleep. A smile on your lips, still a kiss. Soon tomorrow we'll be having coffee just to keep ourselves from fading like the heat. Fades to fall.
Don't talk about love and chance, and let's not talk about the plans we made. Why don't we just sit and watch the sunlight fade? You and I, we pretend that the world will keep on turning, and that we'll have time to spend.
Let's talk about one more song,
Yeah.
Red Hen.
Yeah.
I often like to talk about the outlier song on the record. You can kind of get insight into the whole from the ones that are a bit outside, kind of like the exception that proves the rule or something maybe.
Yeah.
The other songs seem to be deeply personal, not necessarily your personal truths, but the narrators in these songs are talking about personal things that maybe resonate with the listener. Here we have something that I think talks about maybe bigger picture
Yes.
ideas or concepts. So can you talk about this song in terms of that contrast?
Yeah, at first when we were getting ready to record, we wanted to do this song, Red Hen, but I was concerned of whether it fit in with the rest of them, because it is very different.
It's weird. It's really
and
weird.
It's kind of weird.
You saying it's a weird song?
It's kind of a weird song, I think.
Okay.
It has that it starts with that kind of odd riff.
Yeah.
And I think it's beautiful, but it flows in a way that's not like the other songs in the record.
So this was a song that I wrote more about a political moment and imagining someone's perspective in this moment. And ultimately, I do think it fits in with the rest of the record. It's still about distance, but it's kind of about a broader cultural, political distance. Rather than like one in a relationship, in a romantic relationship. I wrote it. It just came out when we were at Fiddle Tunes again in Port Townsend, and I was taking some time to myself, and my hometown, Lexington, was in the news that week because Sarah Huckabee Sanders came in to a restaurant in Lexington.
Red Hen.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Red Hen.
Now
and
this makes sense.
My friend's mom is one of the owners of that restaurant, and so it was she, after talking to her staff, many of whom were LGBTQ plus people, and people of color, were uncomfortable with serving her, and she asked Sarah Huckabee Sanders to leave. And in the weeks following that, it was just an absolute mess, and people were coming from all over, from Ohio and all these places, to boycott the restaurant and calling her and giving death threats to her and her family, and they had to shut down for months because it was dangerous, and just this crazy dramatic moment. And I was on the West Coast just reading about my hometown, and I read
this person that you knew.
Yes, and so I read an interview that she gave where she was kind of talking about her experience with all this, and I wrote this song kind of what I imagined she was feeling.
Blame me all that you want. I'm walking by with my head held high. Shame me all that you want. Oh, I'm walking by with my head held high.
Can we talk about live performance for a minute? I know we're running. I've used up a lot of your time, but I do want to talk about this.
It's fun.
What do you think makes for a good live show? What are you trying to bring to your audiences?
So different. Like we've talked a little bit about the Onlies and the duo, and it's so different in those two.
That was the second half of the question,
Oh.
so you can go there now. Yes.
For the duo, I think that we're trying to. I don't know. We haven't talked about this, so I'd be interested to hear what you think, Viv. But we're just trying to convey the songs, I think, and let the songs and create a vibe like how we would sit around and play them at home. Something that feels intimate and honest, and just lets them speak for themselves. And hopefully, some line or some melody will strike someone, and they can carry that with them. So we're not trying to be or put on anything that doesn't feel honest in the moment, I think. For the Onlies, it's more of a party, and I like when people get rowdy and wiggle. We've been playing to a lot of.
I can wiggle.
Well, you better come down and do it. We've been playing to a lot of people, and like this summer we played a fair amount of outdoor gigs with the Onlies, and it's people sitting back in lawn chairs, and I like to remind them that it's okay to get up or wiggle in their lawn chairs.
Right.
And people have gotten down and dirty in their lawn chairs.
Yes.
and I think that, yeah.
Are there common threads between your live performance between the two? You've contrasted it. Can you now compare?
Yeah, I mean, also in our duo live performances, we do bring in traditional music.
Yeah,
we always do
true.
a couple traditional songs that either that are totally traditional or that we've maybe written choruses for that didn't originally have choruses. So we're definitely trying to show that part of our music as well. And, you know, the Onlies also does, we do meaningful
That's so
songs too. Like it's not just
party,
but it, you know, there's lots of things that are deep as well.
Yeah.
And I think in both we're just trying to convey a love for playing together and old music and bringing it into today and hoping that people find something that brings them joy. Or
well,
feel
I
differently.
hope to see both of these acts in the next couple of days, so I will be able to report back on what you just said and see how it holds true. But I'm looking forward to seeing both of your performances. It's such an interesting. You are so lucky to be able. We talked earlier about balancing it out, to have these two ventures that you were both in, and it seems to be really fortunate that you're able to make these both work, right? So
yeah.
it's great. Okay, I think I've taken up enough of your time. I've really enjoyed this conversation, Vivian and Riley. Thanks so much for being here, and I hope you enjoy your AmericanaFest.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for having us. This is so fun. We've done so many Zoom interviews over the last little while, and it's just so fun to get to talk in person.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, it really is. I haven't done an in-person interview in a while, so it does feel good to look you in the eye and have this conversation. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take my hand.